In 1998, myself and two friends, Alicia and Amy, decided to vacation in Lake Havasu, Arizona for spring break. We set out for our road trip in Alicia's Ford Tempo and stayed the night at a friend's place in Las Vegas before continuing on our journey. The next day, we were about 40 minutes away from our hotel near Lake Havasu when this creepy encounter occurred. It was around 11 p.m. as we drove through one of the many mountainous areas leading to our destination. The roads were curvy, and night sky was pitch black with no other traffic helping to illuminate the area. Alicia slowed down to 25 miles an hour and was being extra careful when we came up on a semi-truck who was also traveling at a slow pace. Rather than try to pass him on the dangerous road, Alicia slowed down even more. Suddenly, a blinding white light appeared out of nowhere, causing the truck to swerve and veer off the road into the dirt. Alicia jammed on the brakes, and we stopped 20 yards or so behind the truck, easing off to the side of the road. The three of us sat there squinting, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Suddenly, the truck driver's side door flew open, but we never saw the man climb out. Then, the radio dial in Alicia's car went crazy and started scanning through a bunch of channels before turning to static. As we all sat there breathless and in awe, the light zoomed away, leaving us again in darkness, with the exception of our headlights and the truck's red brake lights. We exited the car and tentatively began approaching the semi-truck to see if the driver was okay and to discuss the insane thing we had all just witnessed. The driver was gone. We called out, "Hello?" numerous times and took a flashlight to look down the side of the mountain, which was on the right-hand side of the truck. It was a steep hill, but there was little vegetation, so we were able to see everything as we scanned the area to make sure the driver hadn't somehow fallen down the embankment. We shined the light inside the open driver's side door of the still-running truck. Nothing. This man had completely disappeared, yet none of us saw him leave at any point. We got back into the car and waited another 5 minutes before yelling out one more bout of hellos, and finally gave up. In hindsight, we probably should have just called the police when we got to town, but we didn't. We just checked into the hotel room, once contemplating whether or not we should drive back to the site and see if the truck was still there and still running. But we were all exhausted and never followed through. During the next 2 days, several issues occurred with Alicia's car. It had been in good working order before the incident, but now was having a host of electrical problems. The radio continued to go berserk, the doors would sporadically lock and unlock themselves, and the automatic windows refused to work. On our drive back to Reno, the engine just shut down out of nowhere, and the car lost all power. After letting it rest for about half an hour, it started back up, and we were able to get to a small roadside shop to have them take a look and test the battery. They said everything seemed to be in good condition, and were stumped as to what caused the problems. As we were getting ready to leave, Alicia started the car, but went back inside briefly while Amy and I sat in the car. Once again, it lost all power. Before we could exit, all of the doors locked, and the little metal spokes would not budge. In 100-degree heat, we were trapped inside the vehicle. Thankfully, the mechanic had a tool to unlock the doors, so we were able to exit. Once again, he inspected under the hood, but could find no reason for all of this. A few minutes later, the car started back up, and thankfully, the rest of the drive home went smoothly. The car never experienced such issues again, with the exception of the wonky radio dial changing on its own. This happened back when I used to ghost bust with friends, and was one of the first times I went ghost hunting. Usually, I would go to this old historical war marker that's just outside of my town. I used to visit it during childhood field trips. It was about 30 miles out of town, but there is this old cemetery just a few miles down the street that I decided to go on this trip. I was at my friend Aaron's house playing video games with him on the couch in his living room when he brought up the idea of going on another ghost hunt. I didn't hesitate to agree to it. He also suggested that we bring someone else along with us, and since Caitlin, my best friend, was out of town at the time, I chose Braden. He also didn't mind going since I had recently gotten him into ghost hunting. We all met up at the McDonald's in town about an hour before 1 a.m. and discussed what we would be doing and where we would go. Aaron suggested we go somewhere different, so I suggested the cemetery that was just down the street from the fort that we usually went to. Everyone agreed, and we were on our way, arriving at the site about 2 a.m. The gate was usually sealed off, but there was a low point in it that you could literally just walk over, which we did. We turned on our flashlights, and I didn't bother with my ghost app on this hunt because it was a new place for me. I just like to walk around and get the feeling of unfamiliar territory before I decide upon the app, so, for now, I kept it away and just used my flashlight. There were many, many graves. Many old ones, and some new burials too. All three of us had split up and went our own separate directions the moment we entered the gate, to cover the entire grounds quicker. I'd gone towards the back, Aaron took the middle, and Braden stayed with the graves along the front of the yard. We wandered our positions until we heard Aaron call us over to where he was. There were 2 graves enclosed in a gate separating them from the rest. There were normal-sized stones and a rather small one, and I threw out the possibility of them being the owners of the graveyard, and Aaron quickly corrected me. He started to explain the real reason why he wanted to come to that specific graveyard. It was because of these 2 graves. Dead center in the middle of the site, but gated off for some strange reason. He had done some research and found that some sites had said that back in the 1800s, a mother was burned at the stake for the assumption that she was a witch, and she had got caught practicing witchcraft. Her baby was burned as well, as it was considered a witch too, thus explaining the baby tombstone next to the normal-sized one. It was sad to think about. I felt bad for them. Burned at the stake? It's horrible. After giving my condolences, we all went back to our normal positions across the graveyard. I lingered in back. There was a crop pasture just further behind where the back of the site ended, just dirt. You would probably see the first 30 feet of it and then pitch-black darkness for the lack of light. It was pretty eerie, like looking out into a void. I'd walked from one corner to the other, when I heard some kind of calm whistle. Anyway, that's what I thought I was hearing, up until I slowed my breathing and focused my hearing on that dark void in the distance where the sound had seemed to be coming from. It stopped as soon as I had noticed it, and I called my friends over to where I was and told them about it. And I remember Braden snorting at me, "You think somebody whistled? At you?" I was too focused on the void in the distance to care about his dumb comment. I felt like there was something out there. I felt it in my gut. Unlike Braden, Aaron actually believed me and said that we should all wait there to see if it happens again so that they could all hear it. And that's what we did. We waited for a good 10 minutes before we heard that same similar sound. But this time, it was different. It was different because it was closer, and we could all hear it better. It sounded as if it was just on the brink of where our flashlights would meet the start of that dark void. It was so much closer than before. The thing that made us all stop breathing and moving all together was the sound that it really was. It sounded like a woman sobbing to herself. None of us could believe what we were hearing. Surely there wouldn't be a random woman out in the middle of a huge open pasture sobbing to herself. It just didn't make sense. Yet, there we were, too afraid to move. We stayed as still as we could until the sobbing had an abrupt pause in it, as if we'd been noticed by whoever it was making that noise. We were terrified. It was as if we couldn't see it, but it could see us. Aaron had whispered, "Guys!" And we both turned our eyes towards him, just our eyes. He had the most absolute, freakiest terror face I have ever seen on anyone. It was as if he was looking at it, and we couldn't. And that's when the expression on his face gave from looking at it. "The witch!" That's all he said. I almost went into panic. Was it possible that he was actually seeing her? Was it really the freaking witch that we had just stumbled upon? I didn't know what to do or what to say. Braden was the main skeptic of the group, and he had no words or smart remarks as usual. He just kept his face fixed on that void. We all did. And then the most absolute freakiest thing happened. This woman or whatever snickered. With that, Aaron was the first one to take off towards the car. Braden and I weren't far behind either. It was one of those panic runs where you can't scream, but your legs do the screaming for you. That's how it was all the way to the car. It was probably the most awkward silent sprint ever, but we were only focused on the car. We were that terrified. I asked Aaron the moment I started the ignition and drove onto the street if he saw her. If he saw what she looked like. He said he didn't, but he could feel what she looked like, and that it was the most terrifying feeling ever. It was one of those things that you couldn't explain in detail, and he said all he saw were images upon images. When we were back at his place and calmed down a bit, we started drawing conclusions, and Braden and I, being the skeptics that we are, couldn't find any reason for a random woman who would be out in the middle of a dirt crop field crying to herself, by herself, 30 minutes away from town. It was illogical, didn't make sense. After doing thorough research about the site, it surprised me to find that there had once been a rare report on the same mysterious crying, coming not from the void, but from the graveyard itself. A man and his wife were going to enter the graveyard during the day to take pictures when they heard the crying and reported it. They said it sounded like it was coming from the far end corner of the graveyard. Assuming that there was a woman grieving over a relative or a friend who had passed away, they wanted to let her have that moment, and they just left. As they were driving by the graveyard to go back home, however, they didn't see the woman anywhere. They didn't see anyone at all. After doing research as well, they were led to believe that it was the witch who was burned at the stake, just like we did. Was it possible that we had come into contact with the same spirit who was burned at the stake? Why did she target Aaron? These were the thoughts that we kept constantly asking each other throughout that night, in hopes that someone would have an answer for sure. The main question that we all had was really about the woman's snicker. Was she really laughing at us?